What's up everybody? My name is Caleb Bronco. I'm a photographer and filmmaker based in South Florida, and I shoot with the Canon EOS R6. I have used this camera over the past 2 to 3 years for just about every shoot that I have done. This camera has shot for car companies such as Bugatti and Ferrari. It has shot real estate. It has shot private jets. It has shot just about every piece of lifestyle content for me, and this camera has filmed every single one of these YouTube videos. Being that this camera has shot pretty much all of my content over the last couple of years, I guess it's pretty apparent that I am at least somewhat a fan of this camera, and I think the number one thing that I'm a fan of is the sensor that is in this camera. The 20 megapixel sensor that is in this camera is absolutely phenomenal. And I don't think they've quoted it, but I believe this sensor is from the 1DX Mark III, which is incredible to be able to get that sensor in a smaller, cheaper mirrorless camera. As far as the photography side of things with this camera, there's not a whole lot to say because pretty much every camera these days can take great photos. It just depends on what brand you're using and what works best for you. But I can just say that this camera has never left me wanting anything more. But if you're looking for this camera for just photos, easy, it's awesome. The video side of things is where I have a few issues, which I will get into, but the oversampled 4K that goes up to 60 frames per second, that basically uses the full sensor. I believe there's a 1.03 crop, so it doesn't really matter. That is an absolute breath of fresh air to me and what I'm used to coming from previously a 5D Mark IV and an EOS R. I love that in all of the frame rates you can shoot with the full sensor, because even my Red Komodo, if you want to get higher frame rates, you have to continually crop into the sensor over and over again to be able to achieve that. I will say that the 120 frames per second, you do get to use the full sensor, but it is a line skipped 1080p. It is not the same oversampled 4K that you get up to 60 frames per second. But personally, I don't use 120 frames per second that often to really care. The autofocus in this camera is the best that I have ever used, bar none. And it continually gets better with every update that Canon puts out. Being an automotive photographer and videographer, the fact that this camera has a vehicle autofocus tracking system has been a game changer for what I do personally. I just point my camera at the car and it just grabs it immediately. The support from Canon on this camera since its launch has also been awesome to see, because this camera was released with the R5, so I suspected the R6 might get a few updates here and there, but they'd save all the real updates and firmware fixes for the R5. But the R6 has gotten some incredible updates along the way. It's gotten the better autofocus with car tracking and better subject detection that I mentioned previously. It has gotten C-Log 3, which is awesome because this camera originally only shipped with C-Log 1. And also you can now record video to both of the SD cards simultaneously, which is amazing, and this camera should have shipped with that. The ISO performance of this camera is also stellar. It has a native ISO of 800 in C-Log 3, but it appears to have a second native ISO of 3200. I actually made a video about this a while ago. I'll link it somewhere, but 3200 is just as clean as 800. And now we get into the things that I do not like about this camera. And this is the list that just irks me so much, because most of these things didn't even need to happen, and a lot of them can be fixed with a simple firmware that Canon just seemingly refuses to give us. Number 1, the micro HDMI port. Oh my goodness, it seems like all of Canon cameras have a micro HDMI port for some reason. There is plenty of space on this body to fit a full-size HDMI, but they refuse to do it. Number 2, the lack of an all-eye codec in this camera. This could be fixed with a simple firmware. We know the sensor can do it. It's from the 1DX Mark III. Just give us all eye. I'm not gonna buy an R5 just to be able to shoot all eye. It's ridiculous. Just give me the option. Number 3, the overheating. This is probably what has kept most people away from this camera, because it plagues the R6 and the R5. And while it has gotten better, still not perfect. Being that I live in South Florida and it gets ridiculously hot and I shoot outside, this camera likes to pop up the overheating warning every now and then. I've even had it where the overheating warning has popped up in 1080p 60 frames per second. And that drives me bonkers. Anybody shooting longer form content, especially longer form content outside, you're screwed with this camera. Like, sorry. And if you're filming longer form content outside, you're also screwed by number 4 in our list, which is the 30-minute record limit, which is ridiculous. I shouldn't need to buy the R6 Mark II just to get rid of a 30-minute record limit, which it doesn't affect me that much, but it sure as heck affects me when I'm filming these YouTube videos because I am not fast with this. And finally, number 5 of the main things that bug me about this camera is that when you plug in an external monitor to this camera, you lose all functionality of the LCD screen on the camera, unless you are externally recording to like an Atomos. While this camera is an amazing piece of gear, and I actually own 2 of them, I don't think I would recommend it today unless you are just taking stills. With the R6 Mark II out on the market now, I think for around the $2,500 mark, I think that is a much better buy than this. And I know that the R6 currently is about $2,000 new, but I still think that you get enough updates with the Mark II to make it worth it over the original R6. The Mark II doesn't overheat like the traditional R6. It doesn't have a 30-minute record limit. It has the updated hot shoe, so you can put the XLR module on top and just get XLR straight into that camera. It has the ability to shoot 6K RAW if you're into that. You get 4 more megapixels, which means that the sensor is oversampled from 6K rather than like 5.5K, and a few more things. But apart from those few updates, the R6 Mark II still has all of the issues that I talked about with this traditional R6. If the Mark II would have had a full-size HDMI port, C-Log 2, and an all-eye codec in that camera, I think it would be the perfect everyday use for me personally. But unfortunately, Canon being Canon, I don't think those updates are ever gonna come to these cameras or an R6 Mark III. I have shot with Canon cameras my entire professional and hobbyist career, but I don't know how much longer I can confidently shoot with their cameras. The simple fact is, it seems like they intentionally cripple every camera that they put out. And I don't know if Canon does this to like incentivize their users to like upgrade more and more and more into like their cinema line and all through all of their ranges of cameras that they offer, but it doesn't make me want to upgrade, it makes me want to switch. While Sony has a bunch of their own issues, it seems like they at least listen to their customers. People didn't want a 30-minute record limit, it's gone on all of their new cameras. People wanted full-size HDMI ports. All of their like prosumer cameras coming out seem to have a full-size HDMI now. Great to see. People wanted to shoot S-Log 3 so they could get the most dynamic range out of their camera sensor, no matter what camera it was. Almost every Sony camera has the ability now to shoot S-Log 3. Even some of like the bottom of the barrel, like super cheap cameras, you can shoot S-Log 3. Should you in some of those 8-bit cameras? Probably not, but they give you the option so you can do whatever you want. Make your own mistakes. Don't tell me what I can and can't do. I love Canon. They make some incredible products and they've helped me find a passion and create a career from that passion. And I am so thankful for that. But they really need to start listening to their customers. If you've switched from Canon to Sony or from some brand to another, let me know down in the comments because I would love to know what you switched to and from and why. But that is gonna do it for me today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It greatly helps this channel out, and I will see you in the next one.